Hi everybody, I'm Mortellus, showing up for you again in that same gray t-shirts to introduce you to the beginning of week 3, talk to you a little bit about the end of week 2. You should have just finished up reading about the modern funeral, advanced planning, restorative arts and crafts, all that fun stuff where you're building caskets and sewing shrouds and learning sort of what happens behind the scenes. There's lots of interesting details in there for you. um, I thought it might be fun this week to talk a little bit about um, kind of digging into those chapters on actual practice. Those can be some of the least fun from a reader standpoint, I think, just because they're very ritual heavy. So it's kind of like reading a cookbook. But um, those three, British traditional Wicca and CryptoPaganism and Discordianism, I think are some of the more interesting and meaningful ones to me in the whole book. um, Discordianism, I just think is so fun, and it's it's exciting, and it makes such a great example of what might be an unusual request within the parameters of um, faith practices. Uh, who else is going to have their loved one embalmed sitting at a table playing poker, or style them at their viewing playing a video game, or um, have guests wearing wedding dresses? I think those are just really fun things to play around with, and they make a really great picture for the funeral services community in terms of just what might be really kind of out there in terms of requests that really do have a real religious purpose. Um, Crypto-paganism, I think, is really fascinating because, particularly for me, being um, a witch in the Bible Belt. I mean, I live in the Deep South. Here I am in the mountains of North Carolina, very nestled in the Appalachian Mountain Range, and so many pagans that I know are closeted, or when there's family around, or when it's a holiday. I mean, they're sitting in church with everyone else, and we're letting people at our jobs believe that we might be Baptists or whatever, because that's just a way of life for so many people. And sort of looking at how that might be the reality for a lot of people in the world, particularly in countries where um, it's illegal not to declare a state sanctioned faith practice. Um, Crypto-paganism can just be a huge reality. And the idea that we can't have those sorts of services that are impactful for the deceased and impactful for the loved ones who know who they really were, while also sort of staying hidden, I think is ridiculous. So I wanted to look at things that address that and sort of took the broad strokes of what might be viewed as secular or Christian per se, and find us within it. Um, the co-author of that chapter, Kirke, is one of my own students from my own coven, and in a lot of ways that's what their life is, where their family is very Christian, and it wouldn't be perceived very well if they were known to be a witch. And there's been more than one occasion, their marriage, for example, I officiated their service, and it was strange enough having um, if a feminine appearing person who um, their family knew to be a pagan as the officiant. And here I am attempting to make everything as secular as possible so that they can have their day and have their beliefs while also not alienating their family. So the idea that we're still doing that in funerals, it's certainly there. Um, and I don't think that it it serves the dead to say, well, it doesn't matter, they're dead now, just do whatever the family wants and go on. I do think that we have to find space for advocating for things that are meaningful and impactful. As for the British Traditional Wicca chapter, I wanted to just talk about the fact that that and that's certainly my tradition. I'm a Gardnerian witch, and it's certainly hard to talk about an oath-bound tradition. It's very secretive, and um, certainly can't confirm or deny what sort of intercourt rituals they might have or what sort of death practices they might have. So I have to build these practices out of things that are available to the public. And one of my inspirations for that chapter was the fact that my spouse is not a Gardnerian witch. And I found myself often thinking, particularly during this pandemic, when I was, volunteering in hotspots, and we never knew if I was going to come home or survive whatever I was doing at any given time. And I was constantly questioning whether he would be able to really grieve if I died, because my practices are so important to me, and he knows that. But not being a Gardnerian witch himself, he certainly can't manage or even be present for any rituals that might be available for me. So I wanted to take a good hard look at how we as a community, British traditional Wicca as a community, were really serving family members who were not initiates. What did we have in terms of outer court sort of available to the public information that we could wrap up in a neat bow? How could we make public funeral services or viewings, visitations, and wakes, and those things sort of fall in line with those faith practices while still being secretive, meaningful, and really just delivering on all those areas. So that was a real challenge for me. And it was also sort of the question of, what kind of funeral do I want? What kind of funeral do I want to officiate for my upline, the high priest and high priestess who trained me? What kind of funeral do I feel like serves the gods of my tradition and serves the people of my tradition and serves their loved ones? So that was a real challenge. Lastly, restorative arts and crafts is kind of a little tidbit, a joke piled into that title. A class commonly taken by students in mortuary sciences is called restorative arts and crafts. And since that chapter was so sort of heavily focused on practical things like building caskets, sewing shrouds, that sort of thing, I thought it made for an amusing name. It is arts and crafts, but being able to put that little bit of mortuary sciences flavor in there was fun for me. It was one of my favorite classes in school. So any questions you guys might have, I hope you will pop over to the forums that I created for you, talk a little bit more there, and I look forward to seeing the memorials that you designed. I hope you will upload them for me. See you next week.